Time up. Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Amed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Pretty well, deep left center field, it is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE podcast. I'm your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel Kirby. And tonight we have a special guest, Quincy Wheeler, who we're going to get to know in a little bit. But, you know, for anybody who's been paying attention these last couple of weeks, there was a deadline set out on the MLB Lockout, and it wasn't met. So, you know, the commissioner, Rob Manfred, he canceled the first week of games off the schedule. So we won't be having a full 162 game season. It's disappointing for everybody involved, certainly for me and Mel, who have been updating all of our listeners each week, you know, getting ready for the season. But, you know, we're going to be talking a lot about it tonight, the disappointment, the roller coaster of emotions through these last couple months. So without further ado, Mel, you know, why don't you just give us a little bit more information about what we're dealing with in terms of the lockout?
Yeah, first, I just want to thank Quincy for coming on with us. He's one of my favorite follows to talk about the Guardians on Twitter. So it's a pleasure having him on here so that we can kind of break this lockout down, how we got here, where we stand, and, you know, what kind of hope we have moving forward. But, you know, before we get into, you know, kind of the heavy stuff, I do our normal player update segment. And instead of, you know, keeping it strictly to the Guardians this week, you know, as some of you may know, the players have been extremely active on social media, you know, voicing their unity and their outrage with the owner's actions, you know, throughout this lockout. But before that, so a fan asked Shane Bieber about his injury, and good for us Guardians fans when they do get back on the field. He says he's 100%, has been for a while now, and him as well as Yu Chang and Ernie Clement all expressed their desires to get back on the field. You know, that this is just unfortunate, not just for us as fans, but for the players. You know, the players definitely want to get out there and they want to play baseball. But as far as across Major League Baseball, you know, obviously we had Mike Trout speaking out on Instagram. He had probably the most noteworthy post where, for anyone who hasn't seen it, this is also posted on the Guardians of the CLE Twitter page. But just quickly, it says, "I want to play. I love our game, but I know we need to get the CBA right. Instead of bargaining in good faith, MLB locked us out. Instead of negotiating a fair deal, Rob canceled games. Players stand together for our game, for our fans, and for every player who comes after us. We owe it to the next generation." And you know you did something wrong for Mike Trout to get upset, because he really doesn't, you know, come out and do things like this very often. But Jason Hayward, Wilson Contreras, Anthony Rizzo, a whole bunch of other players also had some very similar sentiments on this. So honestly, it's nice to see the players sticking together throughout this process. You know, as we know, they've gotten kind of screwed on the last two CBAs. I think heading into it, you know, they were definitely trying to make back as much of it as they can in this negotiation cycle. Obviously, you're not going to get it all back, you know, in one cycle. So they've dropped a lot of their kind of fundamental changes requests. But yeah, it's like, I feel like this is a situation where it's like they're close, but they've never been further apart. So Quincy, what's your kind of evaluation on where we stand right now?
Well, Mel, Max, thanks very much for having me on, and I enjoy listening to your podcasts quite often, and I'm grateful that you gave me the chance to come and talk to you guys a little bit about it. You know, I know that Mel and I, as we're active on Facebook, we really try to be positive voices about the lockout and things in general. And earlier today, I was really feeling like, hey, maybe they'll try for Jackie Robinson Day. It's the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking into the big leagues on April 15th. All the bad PR that you have, you could just kind of do that, make that the opening day, and it would be, it's hard to say, oh, I hate baseball when they're saying, hey, we're celebrating Jackie Robinson. So I was kind of thinking about that, and I read a couple of reasonable takes that were like, maybe this can work out. But then I've been reading some more tonight, and I don't know. It just kind of seems like it's going to end up being more towards May 1st, in my opinion, just because of the TV contracts. They can lose 25 games, and it's not a big deal. They build that into the TV contracts, and both sides seem to be pretty entrenched in their positions. And I don't mean to say that as in both sides are at fault, because I'm firmly on the side of the players have made a very, very reasonable proposal. That's a huge win for the owners, and the owners won't go for it because they're just interested in breaking the union and getting exactly what they want and proving that they're in power. So that's kind of where I am tonight. Is I'm thinking, I'm feeling like we'll be doing good if we can get May 1st. And I've kind of got this hope in the back of my mind that maybe the skies might part and April 15th might be possible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see what happens. It's been, same story, different week for a while now. And there was that false hope dropped, about a week and a half ago that there might be an agreement reached, and it was really more of a PR stunt by the MLB, the commissioner, the owners, that the players were the ones that were causing this, disagreement and this postponement to the season. And it's just really disappointing because the last time this happened, I wasn't even born yet. I know nothing of like what a serious lockout is, and for it to continue another couple weeks, I would actually start getting really concerned as to like, what does this mean for baseball, for fans, for the whole entire sport in the United States for the future. It just has me uneasy.
Yeah, you guys brought up a couple of really good points that actually a lot of these players have actually mentioned as well. And it's like, if we go back to December 2nd, just the way the owners in the league have kind of acted, this whole missing April seems really calculated and premeditated. If we go back December 2nd, players were locked out immediately. The players actually made the last proposal on December 1st before the lockout was even initiated by the owners. And they took 43 days to make their first official proposal of the lockout. And then, as we know, all those negotiations through January, even most of February, they weren't good faith negotiations, right? They didn't move off any of their original things. The unions dropping their, service time and, the free agency requests, they're dropping all this off the table, just trying to jumpstart something, and to no avail. And, I think I, for one, I definitely was bamboozled Monday night. I definitely thought, okay, this is looking good. Like, it sounds like they're really close. I'm listening to Bob Nightingale retweeting all, our whole opinion of what's happening in Jupiter, Florida was in the hands of Bob Nightingale, which should have been like our first sign that like something's not right here. But it's just so crazy. I think because I've said all along, I've said it on this podcast, I've said it on my Twitter, I was a firm believer they would get this done prior to the start of the season. I really underestimated just how low the owners would go to break this union. And to have that calculated PR stunt where Rob Manfred's walking back and forth saying, oh, we're working on it. We're trying to get it done. And then, in the middle of the night, like, moving around saying it's close, oh, we'll come back in the morning, just to do that, to flip it on the players, is absolutely insane. And I think that right there is the biggest issue of how do you negotiate with that? Because when you have owners who don't want to spend and they also don't want to be outspent, that's kind of hard to kind of build negotiations around. But there has to be some way these owners got to come together, because they're not going to want to lose that summer revenue, right? So they're fine with losing April, but are the players sitting back going, you know what, if we just keep holding out, they're going to end up getting hurt by this? And of course, the players ultimately are most likely going to get more affected by this, because the owners could probably go a whole season before they start seeing any major losses. Whereas guys like John Kenzie Noel, who just got added to the 40-man roster and grew up dirt poor, this was going to be his first chance to really earn, some decent money for him to be able to provide for his family. And, he's just left sitting here. He doesn't, get to train in Goodyear with everybody else. He's just kind of stuck. He has no major league service time, isn't making that major league money yet. And I just feel for those guys. It's not as much the billionaires as these younger guys that, they're fighting for to get paid earlier.
Yeah, there are a variety of things that make it difficult for me to know how to think about this. Oh, first of all, I was going to say, I don't think that you should feel bad for buying into the Bob Nightingale narrative, because even Alex Wood, a baseball player, said that, Monday night that he was optimistic. He's cautiously optimistic that they were going to get a deal done. And Ross Stripling said the same thing, because they were like, well, the owners were sitting down negotiating with us. And there were several reputable reporters. Nightingale is just a mouthpiece for MLB, and I think we knew that, but there were several reputable reporters saying, oh, the owners are actually interested. This is the first time that they've seen Manfred be aggressive about getting a deal done. Maybe they're going to negotiate and figure this out, which really that's all it would take, is just sit down, come to common understandings, and get it done. And so I don't think anybody should feel bad for buying into that. And it was fun staying up late and seeing if it would happen, and then of course getting our dreams dashed. But it was fun to have a night like that.
It was the hope, finally.
I was just gonna say that the things kind of swirl in my mind. If it goes on to a certain point, the players are absolutely going to take the owners to court for negotiating in bad faith. They probably already have enough evidence to build a solid case at that point. Like, that's where it goes long enough. And I feel like the owners shouldn't want that to happen. The other thing that goes on is the more games you cancel, the more other complicated things you have to figure out. Like, what do you do about service time? What do you do about salary? Do you pay them for the amount of games they play, or do they get the full salaries? And the players have already said they're going to fight for their full salaries. So I feel like all those things would tell me the logical thing is, let's figure this out and get this done as soon as possible. But it's pretty clear that there's some irrational, illogical people on the owner's side. Mel or Max, I don't know. Is there anything that you would say, like looking at the players, that you would say, hey, this is something they really need to recognize come next time for negotiating? When they start talking again, what's something that they need to work on, do you think?
One thing, and this is tough, and it's not even really like the current player's fault. First of all, I don't know why this wasn't being discussed throughout last season. It kind of seems like everybody knew the CBA was expiring, right? And I feel like nothing was really said about it until after the World Series. And of course, there could have been meetings going on behind closed doors. I don't think there really was. I think if they were a little bit more proactive, maybe some of this ground could have been made up last year. But at the same time, I don't really feel like the owner's stance would have changed, simply because I think 2020 helped them realize, like, maybe July is a little too late, but I don't think we need the month of April. I mean, look at the at the time the Indians season opener last year in Detroit. It was snowing. Shane Bieber's pitching in a blizzard, and it's bizarre. And that's just the truth in baseball, is with the way the seasons are changing, it might be snowing on your home opener. But it's just tough too, with the NBA playoffs are on too around the time the baseball season starts. And with these expanded players, the owners realize, whatever we might lose in April, which really isn't much, we're going to make that back tenfold once we get these expanded playoffs that we're wanting. And like you had mentioned with the TV deals. So it's like, I think for the players, I agree they need to hold out for their best offer and try to get as much as they can back. But as far as, like, for one, the pre-arb bonus pool, I think they stayed above 100 million for a little bit too long. And I get it. Like, I think it's not even that unreasonable of a request with just the sheer revenue that these players bring into these teams. But it was pretty clear from early on they weren't going anywhere near 100 million. But it is what it is. 85. I mean, it's a joke too, especially with, like, how long was MLB at like 22%? And they're like, that's a non-starter. The players are at 100, they're at 22 of these players to be arbitration eligible, like the Super 2 stuff. And honestly, I don't really know how you negotiate when the owners pretty much already have their mind made up. Like, we're just not going to listen to what they say. We have our opinions and how we want to do this. They basically just wanted to reenact the previous CBA with harsher penalties, which is like, that goes right back to that bad faith negotiation you were talking about.
Yeah, Quincy, I'm glad you brought that up earlier about how, like, I don't know how much longer this will, last, because at some point the players are going to send them to court for arguing in bad faith or negotiating in bad faith. And it kind of, touches on what Mike Trout said, that they're not moving the players. I mean, they're going to wait on this deal no matter how long it takes, because he says this isn't about the players who are playing today. This is about the future generations of talent that are going to be joining, the major leagues one day. And if they don't walk into an environment that, has their best interest within them, when they are the product on the field, they bring the money to these owners, to the facilities, to everybody involved. It's just a recipe for disaster, years down the line. Who knows how long it could be, but I'm glad that the players are taking the stand that they are, because, if I have to live through it, if we all have to live through it, so be it, as long as it's going to protect the sport, that has been America's pastime, but no longer has that same presence to it.
I think that you both are making great points. That's definitely so. I want to start off with that, but I think one thing that I would also add, just kind of thinking about it, if the owners are willing to get back into the negotiating room and kind of start where they left off, it seems like the big thing that's not really moving at all is the collective bargaining. Oh, I'm sorry, the competitive balance tax. The owners are only willing to go up to 220. The players want to start at least 230. And I wonder if that's kind of the area where the players might have to give and say, okay, the first 2 years of this deal, 220 is fine. But then in the third year, the fourth year, the fifth year, we need to see some jumping in the competitive balance tax. I also wonder if it's possible for them to tie the competitive balance tax to certain revenues, to say like, hey, if tie it to gambling revenue, or tie it to, hey, if these revenues are coming in at this, then we'll see an increase of this amount. But that might be tied to being able to see the owner's books. I just don't know if there's a creative way to get around it, because that really seems to me like the stone that just won't budge.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was kind of waiting in these negotiations for them to do something like that, to kind of, sports teams are always like, finding ways through their books all the time to make things happen. So I was kind of waiting for something to be tied to gambling, or some sort of creative way to get that done, because, like I said earlier, they feel so close but so far apart. And honestly, they're where each of their last offers were, they're really not that far apart. And for anybody who doesn't know, the players' last offer was the CBT thresholds were at 238, and then it would go up to 244, 250, 256, 263. Their pre-arb bonus pool is at 85 million, so they came down off that 100 million, and their minimum salaries were at 725,000. The league's best and final offer was no changes to the CBT, like Quincy was just mentioning. They're at 220 over the course of the next 3 years. It wouldn't raise to 224 until the fourth year. They only increased their pre-arb bonus pool from 25 million to 30 million. So they're really far apart there. And their increase in minimums, they went from 675 to 700. So I definitely think the minimum salary could probably get agreed upon pretty easily once they finally sit back down. But yeah, that CBT, I know that's gonna definitely be one of the hangups here. I'm thinking probably the minimum salary, they might come in, hopefully they can meet at like 45. It's probably gonna end up being in the 40s if they could meet somewhere there. But it's like they're in a stare down right now on this CBT from 220. I think if the owners even went up to 225, the players would probably be like, fine. Like,
And the problem is that it's functioning like a salary cap. That's the
exactly.
reason that they're
Right.
they're concerned about it and trying. I don't think what they're asking for is at all unreasonable, and it
At
doesn't
all.
take any money out of the owners' pockets. They don't have to spend to that level. There's no floor, so that's the thing that just boggles my mind about this. You don't have to spend to that level, so if you don't want to, don't.
Exactly. It's like the small market teams are worried about these teams being in their division spending. But look at Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay probably scares the players because Tampa Bay has, a payroll around what the Guardians had. They're 50, 60, 70 million, and they've probably won more division titles than the Yankees have over the last decade. Whereas you have teams like, the Red Sox and the Yankees spending all this money, and their owners are probably sitting there like, why do we have to spend all this money? These teams are down here winning. The Guardians are even consistently competitive. We can
Right.
dog the payroll all we want, but Chris Antonetti and company finds a way to keep this team consistently competitive. And then it's like, why did these owners approve Steve Cohen buying the Mets if they're this afraid of teams outspending them and this CBT? It's like that even seems questionable at this point.
Yeah, it's come to a point where it's just a battle of pettiness on the owner's side, on the commissioner's side, where you're fighting for things that a couple of years down the line aren't even going to matter anymore, because you're going to be making back that money you think you're losing right now, and to just not take the budge off and have just the season get underway. We've been, Mel and I have been thirsting for it for weeks at this point, months, right? Like, we were geared up and ready to go the end of March, regular time to start the season. We're in the middle of the NBA season here. We're nearing playoffs, right? The NFL season's been long and over with at this point. So I know everybody in Cleveland is just ready to get this started, and it's a shame, and it's an embarrassment for the league. I think that press conference that Rob Manfred had the other day,
Yeah,
it was
let's
a
talk
joke.
about that.
It was a joke. You go up there, this devastating news about the season not being able to start on time, and you're laughing, you're having the time of your life with all your super rich Floridian friends. Like, it's not a good look. It's not. I'm sure if Roger Goodell were to go cancel 2 games to start the NFL season, and then he was up there at the podium laughing away with all of his other owners, like, there would be a price to pay. And I'm waiting to see what's going to happen to his career moving forward.
And it's like he's at the negotiations in Jupiter practicing his golf swing. Like, he's just bad optics all the way around. From, after the Astros cheating scandal, calling the, World Series trophy a hunk of metal. Like, he's just always been bad in PR. And a time like this, and there's so many articles out because obviously he got up there and he just bold-faced lied about so many things. Like, truth telling was not a part of this press conference. And I think that's important. Some people need to remember that because, he says, oh, I think it's pretty clear who needs to make the next proposal. Like, here, it's very cut and dry. It's the players' turn. But before the lockout, like I previously mentioned, the players made the last offer and they waited 43 days. But he wants to say phones work both ways. And let's not even get into the whole revenue aspect because, fans do not like to hear that when, they can sit up there and try to say that owning sports teams isn't that profitable. But, Sherman just bought the Royals for what, like $1 billion? Like, these are profitable industries. And there's players said it too, like, they need to stop treating us like we're dumb. It's the same with the fans. Like, he just really thinks he can get up there and say whatever, and nobody's going to fact check him on this stuff. And obviously, we all know, 2020 was a tough year on not just baseball, the entire world, the entire economy, which is fine. That's a pandemic shortened year, but I don't know. And I don't know if you guys caught it too, but he was saying how someone questioned him on that. Like, why didn't you pick up the phone for 43 days? And he's like, I think what really matters is the last 10. He could not even address the question.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, they're so unbelievably tone deaf that, you would just feel like they would say, hey, there's an actual war going on in the world.
Exactly.
Maybe let's get some security in the business we're part of and get the people who are fans something to enjoy, because and all this because they've been given an offer that is perfectly fine and would be a huge win for them if they took that offer from the players. The players allowed this offer. The players went down to 22% of Super 2 players, which is insane that they said,
From
okay, we'll give you
100.
that number. Right. It's just crazy. They don't have that perspective, and they don't care about the pandemic year and the damage that did to the sport, where they couldn't figure it out to get more than 60 games. They just don't care. And I wish that there were enough owners, and I guess it has to be 23 owners to say, hey, we got to get this done. And I just don't know if there is, but it's just crazy. It's just crazy to me. Crazy.
It really is. Max, you got some closing thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really disappointing. I thought that as an organization, the Major League Baseball would be better than this. I thought that they would want to give back to all the people that support them. And that goes for the fans. It goes for the people working in the stadiums. It goes through all of the staff within each franchise. And, it all comes down to the players union versus the owners and the commissioner. And just the fact that it's a battle with the elite. It rubs everyone the wrong way. It's not a good look. And hopefully within the next coming weeks, we can come to you guys with a different topic on the episode. We're waiting. We're ready for this flood of information to come out about what's transpired over these last couple of weeks. Trades are going to be, free agency is going to be blasting off the second that things are opening back up. I know Chris Antonetti's got some trade pawns that he's looking to move around as well. So I'm nothing but ready. So, I wanted to thank, all the listeners tonight for tuning in again. It's going through a rough patch right now, but hopefully it doesn't last forever. Quincy, I'd like to thank you for all of your input tonight, and it was great having you on. But those are just my closing remarks, and I'll pass it off to you guys to shut it down here.
Yeah, Quincy, I want to thank you again for joining us. You want to go ahead and give your podcast a plug?
Oh, that's kind. And thank you, Mel Max, for having me. You can find my podcast on any typical podcast service, the Cleveland Guardians Fancast. You can find my handle for that, Guardian Fancast, on Twitter, or my personal Twitter, Quincy Wheeler 1. And love to have anybody who wants to check it out. It's kind of a complimentary thing to great podcasts like this one, because mine is just like a quick little hit 4 days a week right now. And so hopefully there'll be something to talk about. I know we're all on that. But my podcast focuses on the fans and the players, which I think is why I still have hope for the sport, because the players are so great, the game is so great, and the fans are amazing. To hear all the fan stories about how they became fans and what they love about the game, that's what I love the most. So I'm not going to let the owners get me too down about it.
Yeah, and I want to also thank everybody for listening. I'm just craving, the thing keeping me going and keeping me interested in baseball is the game could be argued it's better than it's ever been right now with the young talent. You got Tatis, Trout, Acuna Jr., Jose Ramirez, all these different guys, and we're missing, parts of their prime. And, I just can't wait for this lockout to finally be over so we can see that rush of trades, free agency. Is there going to be a Rule 5 draft? All spring training, all these things need to happen still. Like Quincy mentioned earlier, just figuring out all the service time stuff and what salaries are players going to get paid. So once this does get agreed upon, I think baseball has a chance to really redeem themselves with all this flurry of activity, which hasn't happened since before the lockout, but that had fans' attention. So once again, I want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you check out BelievelandMediaLLC.com. Check out all our written content and articles, as well as all our other podcasts on the you can get these on all the major platforms. Make sure you rate and review on Apple Podcasts. We will also have the video episode posted on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to that channel as well. And Quincy, once again, thanks for joining us. I hope we have baseball here soon.
Thanks for asking me.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye. Thanks.